Welcome, everyone, to episode 274 of Just Joshing. I am your host, Joshua Penteloresco. I write stuff and podcasts, too. Today, we're doing a little something different on Just Joshing. Recently, I did a talk at IFWA, which is the Imaginative Fiction Writers Association, based out of Calgary. I did a little panel presentation on crowdfunding. I thought it would be a really interesting thing to feature on the podcast. I've done an IFWA presentation in the past. This is regards to the pros and cons of what I've learned at Patreon, GoFundMe, and what I do know about Kickstarter. Now, I don't have all the answers, and I'm not going to say I do, but I thought it would be a good little side venture. Meanwhile, next week, I'm going to be having some great guests coming back in. We're going to be going 2 Canadian authors next week, and then the week after that, we go a little international. Buy or Leave Band and Zappa. Giant Bearded Games. Those are 2 guests coming up, and then the week after that, we're going to see. A couple things have to play out, but yeah, really cool stuff. Anyways, I got some giveaways to talk about real quick before we get to the conversation. It's the following. I'm going to be giving away more copies of Space Mercs. That will release July 30th. I'll be drawing winners tonight, and then tomorrow I'll be announcing them on my Twitter, Instagram. I'll be contacting the winners tomorrow. Jess Salter's Man and Brother, as well as a giveaway. I'm going to repeat that as well. This is for Thursday. There will be new winners announced on Monday. So, yeah, feel free to enter at the link below. Outside of that, yeah, that'll do it for this episode of Just Joshing. I'm going to do all the credits here because the presentation speaks for itself. Support the podcast. I'm on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. My Instagram and Twitter are at jpenteloresco. And stay inspired out there, okay, guys? I'll talk to you guys next week. Just Joshing is sponsored by Indie Imprint. Indie Imprint brings your creations to life. They believe in indies helping indies, and they have been known to contribute to everything from game jams to NaNoWriMo and everything in between. As a creator, you just bring your work to them, whether you're a writer, musician, or video game designer, or whatever the case may be, and they'll help you format, proof, and distribute your project to a variety of different avenues. For more information, check them out at info@indieimprint.com. And by Jennifer Ron, author. Jennifer is re-releasing her fantasy series Legend of Tenlock with her first book, Wicked Initiations, coming out when words collide. She's also been released a Dark Quarter, courtesy of Bundarin Press. You can contact her at longevitithesis.ca. That is worldwideweb.longevitithesis.ca.
I'm going to record my own thing so it helps me get better, and also I like, in case people make a ask themselves, namely me, it's all good. But number 2, I need to hit this before the very beginning. This is my experience. Everybody that goes through this experience gets a different result. There's a lot of approaches to how this can work, and sorry, my bad. There's a lot of approaches of how this can work out, and for everybody it can go completely different. I'm going to talk about my failure first, my failures, my successes, and finally what I'll pay for, because all 3 of these things matter in crowdfunding. So my failure is my Patreon, and I'll explain why. I decided this year to go on. Yes?
Did you buy Patreon?
Yeah. Okay.
And crowdfunding, actually.
Oh, okay. So at the very beginning, crowdfunding is when you go to an audience and go, hey, I have a project. Patreon is a little different. We'll get to that in just a second. I have a project, and I would request funding from you, and in return, I will give you a book, movie, comic, you name it, right? And other cool things. Kickstarter is probably the most famous example, and I will talk about that on this journey. But there's another option too, Patreon. And Patreon is a little different. Patreon does do a similar thing. There is crowdfunding involved, but that one is a little bit more intensive. Now, one of the things I did this year is I'm a part-timer in my day job now. I've been pursuing my podcast and my writing to become much more of an employment thing. And as a result, one of the things I wanted to try was Patreon. I had a plan. I had an idea of kind of what I wanted to do, what needed to be done. I followed some very successful Patreons. A good example of a very successful one is Colleen Duran. Colleen is an illustrator. She does comics for big like DC, Marvel. Distant Soil is probably what she's most well known for personally, but she's done work with some of the best people in the industry. She's a good example of a successful one. Senya Ansk, an independent writer, novelist. She's also a very successful patron. And I was watching them. I had an idea, like with my podcast, what to do and how to do it. Where I fell short is at this moment in time, it's twofold. One, Patreon's a full-time job. It's not, unlike Kickstarter or GoFundMe or Indiegogo, whereas you have a project, you are doing things on an ongoing basis. As a result, you have to make sure you have the proper time and audience to follow what you're doing. Now, there's a lot of ways to do it. One of the most, like Senya, one of the ways she's really successful, she teaches a course on how to write, like the writing acts, the 12 acts of writing, and she goes into great detail, and she gets some very serious people to go into it, and she does very well with that. Colleen is an illustrator. Because she's an illustrator, you get an opportunity to see works in progress for big companies, her own personal projects, but she also does great education on the business of comics, particularly contracts, rights, that kind of thing. And because she has such a good knowledge base in those things, it's fantastic. Now, I do have a decent podcast knowledge base, but for me, going into Patreon compared to whatever your audiences you have, it's almost like you're building a brand new audience from scratch, unless you are a very established audience. If you have that, you can go into Patreon and you can probably do fairly well for yourself in time. The problem with it is I've gotten bigger, but I'm not quite that big yet. That was failure one. Number two, for me personally, sponsorships for my podcast have been a lot more lucrative for me and a lot less time demanding. And because I'm still working, still do a podcast, I'm still writing books, balancing my time did not work out the way I wanted to. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean I won't go back to Patreon. I think I will down the road. I just think at this moment I did it too soon. And that was my failure. Now, that all said, like I said, results vary. If you have, the reason why like someone like Rob Sawyer doesn't make a ton of money on Patreon is because, quite frankly, it's not worth his time. He could come up with a course outline, he could come up with like things that would actually draw people to him like that. But for him, it's a pay cut. And because it's a pay cut for him, it's not worth it for him to put the actual time in required to make Patreon a success. The reason why someone like Colleen or Senya are very successful at it is, one, they have the time. In Colleen's case, she does things like giveaways. She also does things like she's an illustrator, so you can see the results of what she's doing quickly. Whereas if you're a novelist, you can do excerpts here and there, but it's not quite the same thing. You can see a finished product or the facsimile of a finished product on Patreon. So what I learned from there for me personally was I'm not ready for it yet. I will go back at some point. My biggest success is literally in my mouth, my teeth. 2 years ago, I did a GoFundMe. At the behest of somebody in this room, I gave it a shot. And it worked out better than I could have hoped for. I didn't even know what to expect, because the thing about that was I did not know who would support me, who wouldn't support me. And at the very beginning, there was a very unexpected snafu at the very beginning I did not anticipate, although I'm thankful it happened. At the end of the day, though, I literally got $1,000 to go to teeth. I went to Mexico, got my front teeth fixed. It definitely has been that was a great experience. And GoFundMe, which I'll go into next, is a great tool for people that need help for specific needs. I wouldn't recommend it for projects so much, and I'll get to why when we get to Kickstarter. But it's still a decent place to go for aid, funding. If you wanted to do a charitable cause kind of event, GoFundMe is not a bad way to go about it, right? The advantages of GoFundMe over, say, a Kickstarter is GoFundMe will give you your money no matter what you raise, you will get your money. The big downfall with Kickstarter, and we'll get that in more detail, is it's all or nothing. Whereas GoFundMe, let's say the goal is $5,000 and you get $2,000. Well, you will get that $2,000. Like, you will get it at a set amount of time and place when you do it. The reason I don't recommend that one for publishing or movies or games or whatever it is you're choosing to do is your reach is not. GoFundMe is more for aid or for a charitable cause or for something along those lines. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you couldn't make it work, but it's kind of like the wrong tool for what you're going for. The tool you guys want, if you guys want to do crowdfunding, is Kickstarter. And there's a couple reasons why. Most people do not know this. Kickstarter is probably the largest publishers in the world, year in, year out. You don't see the best-selling list. You will never see them on a best-selling list. You will not see them there. But comics alone is the #2 distributor of comics in the world. People get published there all the time. You get a very loyal fan base there. And it's big. In books, it's no different. There are people that are very successful in books as well. It is a very large community. That all said, there are some things that you should do and you shouldn't do regardless. If you're going to choose this route, I'm going to make this recommendation if you do it. Finish your book. I got a story I'm going to tell you guys here about what I'll buy, about buying it, and this is a lesson I learned from a buyer beware thing. Finish your book. You don't need to have all the printing done. But make sure you have your printing, you have some ideas for extra prizes like t-shirts, buttons, things that are cheap that you can actually fulfill. Kickstarter is literally the art of integrity. Your credibility is literally online. Now you can be forgiven for being late. Shit happens. And people do expect a little bit of lateness. So I'll get to my buyer beware story right now. So a friend of mine in Arizona was funding a comic book. Very, very talented artist. I knew him, and I interviewed his bud. Good guys. All right, they're not done yet, but I trust them. I'll put down X amount of dollars. They didn't finish. I'll tell you a really funny story about that. No, things happen. Life happens. It does happen to us all. But it got to the point where it was so late, I actually emailed one of them. It's like, okay, look, I get that you're late. I get that it's not done. Could you just tell us what's going on? Heard nothing. Here's a funny story. This year, last year, towards Christmas time, I was collecting for an artist for one of my books I'm releasing this year, Alice Zero. And who would actually come for looking for a job but one of the artists that actually was in that Kickstarter? I'm not kidding. Like, I am not kidding. Like, that actually happened. So I already have an example of, like, and again, I do. Credibility and integrity are huge with me. If you don't, I get if things happen. But if you're going to make it, if things don't happen, you owe it to your audience to explain what exactly is going on, right? If you're sick, if there's like a tragic death in the, like whatever, like you tell your audience because they are investing in you, and never ever take that for granted. Number one, so make sure your work is finished. At least the main work is finished, and you have an idea of your price points with all the extra things you want to give away, because here's the thing, Kickstarter does take a percentage of it. Like, it's not a big percentage, but they do take a percentage of it, number one. Number two, you want to give yourself a margin for error. A very common thing that happens with Kickstarters when they do get funded is they sometimes run out of budget to do all the things they promised to do. So make sure, if you have this idea, hey, I want to do bumper stickers, I want to do posters, I want to do t-shirts, I want to do all that stuff, I want to do a prank phone call in China. Yeah, that actually was a Kickstarter thing. It was really cool. But make sure you have the budget for it. You plot that into your price points. Because if you have it, it'll work out. Now, that all said, the first time you do a Kickstarter, the other thing, big important thing, is interaction. Engage your audience, even if it's a tiny audience. Because probably the first Kickstarter project or the first crowdsourcing project is going to be small, right? You have to, but again, it's about proving you can deliver. If you deliver on a regular enough basis, people will come to you. A good example of someone that does a really good job of this is Travis Hansen. Travis Hansen is a comic book illustrator. All his stuff is published through Kickstarter. He does really well for himself. He does cons. Like, this is his main source of income. Another good example, another comic book guy I follow, Dirk Manning. When he started, he was getting $2,000 stuff to fund. Now he gets $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. And so it's very possible that you will get to a significant chunk of money doing this. But you have to follow the very basics of finishing your main work. If you're not up to the printing costs. Like, obviously, yes, which one of the reasons you're funding is for printing. But yeah, show that you at least have the work done. Because if you do that, you can deliver it within a reasonable amount of time. If there's a printing delay, no one's going to punish you for that. But, again, going back to my buyer beware story, if it's not done, you're not guaranteed to see it. And this is your money, and you guys work very hard for it, right? And that's why you got to look at it too. The people that are funding you have worked hard for what they got, and they're giving it to you. So you got to make sure you deliver, whatever that case may be. Finally, here's the thing about Kickstarters too. They are all or nothing. So either you will get your funding or you won't. So, especially in the very beginning, prep for failure. Because you might fail the first couple times you go to swing at the bat. That's just reality. Obviously, if you have an audience, which is a big thing, that will make this easier. But don't slack on the interactivity. Don't slack on the promotion. I had a friend of mine that I emailed the other day. She told me about her Kickstarter that was failing. I go, well, why didn't you tell me? I have a podcast. I can promote. I can do that. I didn't think you cared. It's like you gotta be. And that's the other thing. You can't be afraid to ask. One of the hardest things to do in life is to ask for help. And one way of looking at crowdfunding is that this is asking for help. That is one way of looking at it. The other way is you're asking people to invest in you, right? And the thing is, you have to believe, and this is not ultimately why the interaction is so important, you have to believe in your work. If you do not, the people you're trying to pledge to will not either. You have to make sure that you are showing beyond a shadow that you are committed to this, that you believe in it. Because if you can do those things, you will draw a crowd to you. Now, I can't tell you how big or how small, but you will draw a crowd to you. That's what I pay for when I support someone on Kickstarter, because I know they're serious about what they're doing, right? If I can see it, if I can believe it, I will invest. And it's true with you guys. You guys can go out there and say, yeah, but that's not what you really want to do, but you can't afford that printing cost, but you really believe in that work. You should go out there and you can present that in a way that really, really, really works. I would suggest a video. That would be a good idea, even just a 1-2 minute video that explains why you're so invested into this. That would be great. Go out there, show what you can do, tell them what you're offering them, and be very direct and upfront about your tiers and rewards. And if you do succeed, also have some extra tiers. Because you never know. Sometimes projects really boom. The first 3D printer was fun. Like literally, I wish I could have afforded it. Man, dude, I wish it. He got like $800,000 in the first day. It was ridiculous how much money he got on Kickstarter. He got to the point that he literally had to post, guys, listen, can you choose this tier? My house is completely overrun by these things making themselves. Can you like go to this? It does happen. It blows up. Reading Rainbow is probably the biggest example of this. Reading Rainbow hit their goal in the first day. Within like the first day, like LeVar Burton had it was a $1 million goal. That's all he thought he'd get. He got that within under 24 hours, right? He was like, well, I gotta think of stretch goals because that was ridiculous, right? But it's Reading freaking Rainbow. It's awesome, right? So the point I'm getting to is, if you're going to do a Kickstarter or you're going to do a GoFundMe or you're going to do anything you're doing here in crowdfunding, you need to have a plan. You need to have a plan of like establishing what your baselines is, what your goals are, what you are offering to people, what you can feel comfortable doing that with. Second, Paul, consider your audience. Who is your audience? Do you know? If you do know, right, then those are the people you start asking to help you. Now, sometimes that might be just your family and your friends to start, but that's how you start. And then what you do is, if you have a good product, which is the ultimate thing, if your product is good, people will talk, right? People will offer to help you, make suggestions, and share. And that's the last thing, too. When you're doing crowdfunding, if you believe in something, share it. Don't like it, share it. Shares are way more important on Facebook than likes. If you like something, there's a chance I will not see it. But if you share it, you increase the odds of people seeing your projects. I would actually go so far to say that probably the biggest thing, just in terms of supporting each other, period, we don't do enough, is share each other's work. If you really believe in someone or something, you should share it, because that will increase the range of the audience. You get enough shares, you have increased the platform in which you're doing, right? And I recommend that not just with crowdfunding. I recommend that, period. If you really believe in somebody in this room, give them the ability to share it, show your work, retweet it, share, whatever the case may be, because that will give them a lot more. If you can't financially support somebody, that goes a lot farther than you realize. Let's see. Again, everybody's experiences will vary. The thing I always say this in my podcast now: the rain will fall where it falls. You can't really argue where success goes, but what you can do is give yourself. The objective in crowdfunding is to give yourself as much preparations for success as possible. The things that can get in your way. You not believing in your own product or not projecting your belief of your own product. So do that. Have a plan to complete your project, right? Even in the event things do go awry. And three, right? And three, above all else, show integrity to the audience that is paying for you. If you can do those three things, it may not go according to plan because life very rarely does, but people will respect you and they will give you another chance, even if you do fail this time. So yeah, that's it. Those are the three keys. And I wish everybody here the absolute best of luck. It's not, I suggest, it's always a good experience to do once. So I'd recommend it to everybody. If you do, good luck. Let me know about it. I'll promote it on my podcast. Seriously, I will. And three, don't be afraid to fail. That's it.
Josh, when you did your crowdfunding and Patreon and whatnot, did you have a budget in terms of marketing? Because I've done Kickstarters for corporate, and you have to have a pretty decent budget to start. But I don't know about the.
It's a good idea. Like I would recommend. Again, everybody's like budget may vary.
Yeah, I'm just wondering in the art world if you need that same kind of budget, because honestly, if you're going to do Kickstarter with a new product, it won't get seen unless it's like.
Here's the thing. I always say it's like the first project is always the one that you're going to get the least amount of results. What the good. I think I should go to this. Expect a loss the first time. Like even in terms of marketing thing, the important thing. The first time, succeeding the first time, it should not only that you succeeded on your project, but that you delivered. That will actually play a bigger role into your next crowdfund, because what will happen there is people will know that you have a track record. That's important. Even if it's a small group, it grows surprisingly quickly because the amount of incomplete projects that are out there is actually quite high. Yes?
These days, the biggest bugaboo I find with Kickstarter is shipping costs.
Yes.
What would you recommend these days for shipping? Do you include it as part of your Kickstarter?
You have to. You have to. You have no choice, because let's say you're really successful. Like it does happen. No one can sometimes you do all things like have the budget, plan, all that stuff. You get nothing. Sometimes people just fall into it. It does happen. So if you have like 1,000 orders, you're gonna have to ship them all somehow, and you want to actually have money when it's over. Like I said, one of the most common problems with Kickstarters is they don't budget for those things at all. So what happens is when they'll get their funding, and then they might complete their project, but now they can't ship it. Right, so that is definitely something that must be factored in.
Are there fulfillment centers that around the world that you know anything about?
No, unfortunately, no. Kickstarter is very much a reputation thing. Like
Kickstarter themselves doesn't have them, but there are fulfillment centers.
Yeah.
You can also restrict to North America or something, or you could also have international, because that's another mistake, is people allow it to be international, but they only calculate shipping locally.
Yes.
Huge problem.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of webcomics who have kickstarted physical books, and I cannot remember the person who is running this particular one. It funded out, that's fine. They were only shipping physical items to North America.
Yeah.
They had people who were ordering things from the UK and Australia, and they said, I'm sorry, but I'm not spending $80 just to ship a $20 book to you.
Yeah.
So be reasonable about what you're expecting.
Yeah.
So for authors that have a book, I'm not sure how that fits into the Kickstarter.
Because you got so things you could think of it like this, right? T-shirts. Like just as bonus, like fulfilling a book will work. It's much like a graphic novel, much like any other product out there. You can show a physical copy of your work. You can it's not common like for an author, for example, let's say they'll get a cover done, for example. They'll do a cover of their book. They'll plaster it in front of a book. They'll show it as an example, right? And they'll show you like this is what you're gonna get, right? Not unheard of at all. You just physically show it.
But you haven't written it yet.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a book you've got written. You might even have it on Amazon and self-published or whatever. You kickstart those things?
No. So here's what you do. Like,
So
okay.
what's the difference?
The difference is when you crowdfund, you're basically okay. You've written the book. It's edited. It's ready. Like it's a manuscript that's ready to be printed, published. However you want to do.
Sell?
But yeah, possibly, right? This is more common in comics than it is in like the written word. It's not unheard of for a company to actually kickstart a project to actually see what the demand of that project is and then release it to the public.
And then write it.
Yeah.
So if you haven't written the book yet, you could say, hey, I'm Michael, I like writing this. If I write this book, will you pay me? And then you can find out. You can get paid up front, get passwords before you write
Caution,
it.
but there's
you have to finish it.
Yes. You got one, you have to finish it fast. Two, like I said, remember that story I just said about the artist that didn't finish his work? People remember that stuff. You have to be able to fulfill that.
But I'm still lost between whether I've started something or if I've finished it.
I would generally recommend you finish it. It's a better idea. It's a better idea to have a finished product.
Why wouldn't you just self-publish?
Because if someone else might. If people believe in your work enough to pay for it, it saves you a huge cost. You're already
What's my cost?
printing.
Self-pub, I'm not paying anything.
Well, if you want physical copies, yeah.
Yes.
If you're just
People
doing
order
an
it
ebook.
online and they pay for it. So
But
something that
it's a different marketplace.
It's just
Yeah.
different market.
If
Yeah.
you self-publish digitally, then you might put out a Kickstarter for like a hard copy edition of your book.
Yeah, and it is.
You get more funds than you need just for the people who are buying it that way, and then with the extra, you've now got a printed line.
So with that money,
you
would
can put that into a store. That's
When I buy all those books, and I've got 1,000 books.
Yeah.
And
You
then you
buy.
would physically ship it.
Yeah, you physically system. That's why we were talking about shipping earlier.
That's an actual.
Oh, it's done. It's done all the time. Yeah, I guess like you'd be shocked if you looked at the numbers how big Kickstarter impacts publishing. It's huge. Yes.
I heard there's pros and cons to this. Apparently, some record people, indie producers of records and discs, have a tip jar on their site. But I heard the negative side is for both authors and recording artists is that the person might download pirate your CD or pirate your book, ebook, and then just give you 50 cents. Well, sort of ease their guilt.
Okay, this one's about somewhat building an audience too. Okay, so think of it like this. Okay, let's say you have 10,000 people that like your stuff, just for the sake of argument. Yeah. Let's for the sake of argument. Now, here's a question for you. Of that 10,000, how many of them will pay for you? That's a big reality of it. Like there are always going to be people that, it's true with all of us. It doesn't matter what industry it is, that will look at what they can get for free. There will be another group. There will be another faction that will pay something. Some that will buy like super fans that will buy everything, right? And we all have a diverse. So tip jars. The thing about them is they're kind of great, but on the same token, like what's your audience? Like if your audience is a very small audience, it's honestly probably not worth it, unless you're one of those very lucky people. Let's say you have 1,000 people that they're all super fans. Then in which case, awesome. But that's generally speaking, most of us don't have that. Most of us, if you're looking at it from a percentage point of view, assume that. Okay, I look at it like this way. I have an audience of, on average, anywhere from 200 to 400 people a week listen to my podcast. Of that 200 to 400 people, 40 of them might pay for something I'm doing. Of that 40, maybe 4, right, will actually like buy everything I do. And it's just me being very, very pragmatic about the numbers. I'm going to err on the side of how little people will invest in. Now, that might not be true. It might be a bigger number, but that's just a good way. Tip jars are, if you have a big enough audience, they can be lucrative, but by and large, most people don't succeed with that.
Well, I'll just speak from my own experience. I've got a tip jar on my webcomic, and I get about 1,000 people a month, and I might get 2 to 3 tips a month. So it's $15, which calculated over a year, that's a con. But overall, my patron does much better, and I'm looking also. Actually, that's what I wanted to ask for you. We tried launching on Kickstarter once before, failed miserably. We got $500 out of the $2,000 that we wanted. How soon do you think that you can reapply the same product?
Okay, first and foremost, I guess I asked this question. Did you guys look at what you did wrong?
Yeah.
I'm asking that, like, that's a legitimate question. The very first thing you look at was if it doesn't get funded at all, did you have an audience for it? Were you interactive enough with the people? Were you all that stuff's important, right? If you solve those problems, you can try again. I would say within 6 months to a year.
Okay.
Right. With that, but again, the presentation of what you're doing has to be different than what it was the first time.
Yeah, just a 6-year-old tip for shipping. When I shipped a book 6 years ago, you could ship anywhere in the continental U.S. The book got shipped for I think it was like $11, but shipping in Canada was anywhere from $9 to $17, and there really didn't feel like a lot of rhyme or reason. It would be more expensive to ship to Winnipeg than Toronto, or So it's just one of those things to keep an eye out for if you are budgeting that in.
Yes.
Budget a little extra on the U.S. shipping to maybe cover some of the Canadian costs.
Yeah. Yes.
One of the people I follow on Twitter is Spike Trotman.
Okay.
Iron Circus Comics. She has done something like 14 or 15 Kickstarters and made over $1 million.
Yeah.
Oh, every single one of them has paid out. She has a lot of advice on how to run specifically webcomic and comic-based Kickstarters, but also Kickstarters on a general level. And she really says, know your audience, know what you can do, follow through. She never kickstarts something that she isn't ready to print on her own dime. She's never had to, though. And she says, this is a good thing because it means that she has money that she can apply to other projects.
Which goes back to what I said at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Always be prepared.
Yeah, and she does lots of tiers to get lots of engagement, and the social media thing because she's on social media all the time.
What's her name?
Spike Trotman.
Okay, Calvin.
Iron Spike.
It's
Mike first and Calvin.
Yeah.
Okay.
So knowing your audience, I'm still confused. So
Okay.
I'm trying to sell a book.
Okay.
Let's just say. So why would someone want to give me money? Why would they want
Okay, so what kind of book is it?
What do they expect?
Okay, so this is a bigger conversation, but we'll try to sum this up quickly. What do you write? Like, what do you write?
urban fantasy?
Okay, who reads urban fantasy?
Everybody.
That's a very vague answer.
Katie does.
Okay, but you be specific about stuff like that. Who do you know that reads that kind of fantasy? At the end, right? You start with the very basic stuff. Who do you know? Then you can do some more bigger research. Who are the demographics that generally read this? What engages them? And you just ask those, like, it's problem solving.
Well, but my question is, they all are buying books.
Yeah.
So-
Why would they want to give me money?
We missed a discussion, you just glazed over the tiering, so for people who have no idea what this is.
Okay, so all right, we'll do tiers real quick. So basically, the amount of investment you can do in a Kickstarter completely varies. Almost every Kickstarter I know has a $1 tier. The $1 is basically thank you for funding, and there's usually no credit, no mention of it. Sometimes you might see a mention of that person in the book, depending on how many $1 tiers there are. But it's generally it's a thank you. And there are people that just help Kickstarters $1 at a time. That's really cool. Then at that point, though, it varies depending upon your product. Like maybe, for example, like a book, maybe $20 is the tier that gets you a physical book. Maybe $5 gets you a copy of the ebook. Maybe $10 gets you like a book plate. Maybe $20 gets you the book. Maybe $40 gets you like 2 books. Maybe $50 gets you 2 books, a book plate. Maybe like $30 gives you a T-shirt. Now I've just created 6 different tiers for a book. The idea is that one, you're trying to look at budget. Not everybody has a budget to buy everything, right? First and foremost. Second, you're creating as many engagements as you can that are interactive and fun. Some people love T-shirts. I do. I love Kickstarters. I get these really cool, like one-of-a-kind T-shirts I can't get anywhere else. They're fun. Sometimes it's buttons. Sometimes it's beads. Sometimes it's like it. And the book can also lend aid to kind of what your merchandise is too. For example, if it's say a Halloween-themed book, maybe you make like a special like Halloween gift card or like you get like a plushie. Like it's not unheard of to actually have like these little things going on in each of these tiers. And sometimes people just want the toys. Now they don't necessarily want the book; they do want the toys. I'm not joking. Like it's a serious part of it. Like you are basically taking your book and you're merchandising it in as many ways your budget will allow, right? And generally speaking, there are 1, 5, 10, 20, 40, and then there's like these really big mega tiers. It's not like, for example, like a good example of this is maybe, let's say Susie funds a book. Susie, right? All right. Now someone gives her $2,500, and for $2,500, she will go out and
I'll fly there.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll read your book.
And it happens. Yeah. It does happen. Like there are these like mega tiers for super duper fans. Mm-hmm. The Reading Rainbow one of them got the opportunity to actually get Jordy's visor. Yeah. All right, so I mean just to give you like an idea, like there's these big. Then my personal favorite was the Crank Call one. I loved it. Like that was such a cool like $45. We'll call anywhere, anybody. We don't care. And, which is like again, which by the way leads to a very important thing about tiers. All right, yes, budget's a big part of it, but make them fun. Because because the thing is,
you can get also like media and stuff for doing that. Right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's
share it if it's weird.
Yeah. Okay, so.
Potato salad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
I remember hearing about that one.
Yeah.
Know your audiences basically. If you have fans, like people who read multiple of the things that you write, know what would excite them, what would satisfy, what wouldn't they find satisfying, and go along with that and give them a way where they would enjoy supporting you in a way that expresses to their friends or whatever.
And sometimes honestly look at the book itself. Like for example, I have a novel that has a unicorn that fart rainbows in it. You know, if I did a Kickstarter, what I would be focusing on? Unicorns that fart rainbows. It just seems like it would sell itself, right? But
there's games that have that.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you, like a Kickstarter I want to do next year. I have a book-board game combo idea based on Alice in Wonderland. So guess what? All my tiers are going to be. They're going to be very Alice in Wonderland centric, because I know that that's my audience. I know who would be interested in those things, right? With your book, whatever your subject matter, what's your book about? And what can you do, again, just to merchandise it in as many ways as possible? What seems fun to you? What makes you laugh? What makes you smile? What gives you satisfaction? Because chances are, whoever your audience is will enjoy the same things.
So if you self-pub, the big problem is finding somebody to buy it.
But in Kickstarter, they've already bought it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's almost sounds like it's better than self-pub.
It is, and again, this is where the results may vary thing comes into play.
It's a marketing thing.
Yeah.
If you're good at marketing.
Yeah.
So, one of the other ideas, if you have a series of books, you can have tiers that actually, okay, you can buy the book, this book, but I'll also tier with multiple books that I've had in the series. So you can get everything all at once for a discounted price.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kevin.
I would also say, especially for sci-fi and fantasy fans, don't neglect how much those fans enjoy exclusivity and special editions. I've seen Kickstarters have like, this tier gets you a special cover.
Yes.
And people love that because it's the idea of you have something someone else does it. And that just it goes a longer way than you think it would.
Yes, it does. The only thing about that is also note your budget, right, on that, because that you will be paying that artist. Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about stretch goals and how they apply, because they're different than tiers.
Well, okay, so stretch goals are like okay, but let's go with the Let's go with the most audacious thing. Let's say my board game makes big. You know what I love to do? Let's do an expansion right now, right? All right. Let's just go right into the next expansion, whatever that is, exclusively for this Kickstarter. I hit all my goals. I'm like, Like, it's something that's beyond what you're going for. Like, and it's having like or let's say it's a book. Let's say you finished the book. You know what I want? You know what would be really cool if I did like a special like illustrated edition. It's a stretch goal. It's something like that's a little bit above and beyond what you would normally do, but you could. You might just hit that goal, right? Especially if you're budgeting really, really well. Two final things. The biggest area of time you should really be marketing your Kickstarter is twofold: at the beginning and at the end. People, especially if you are like literally, like, let's say your goal is $5,000, and you are like 4,800, let people know, because a lot of people will just hit you to push you right over the top. It does, like if you're really, really close to your goals, it's not unheard of for just people to help you. Not even like your product at that point, but you're just so close that just getting bumped up does happen. So at the end of a campaign is a really prime marketing time, and at the beginning, obviously, because you're just launching it. The middle is where you kind of have to be very creative in terms of how you keep it interesting without actually going, please buy my shit.
Actually, we have more time. But you said be careful of shipping costs. But if you're kickstarting, is that international? Or keep it
No, we mentioned this earlier. You lock down where you can ship. Like, for example, if you know.
I'm not talking about shipping. I'm talking about you live in England. Will you kickstart? Will you?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. But if you're gonna, again, this is where if you're targeting an international audience, you gotta find the challenge there is finding stuff that's exclusive to them that you can afford to do. And that's a tricky balance depending on where you're shipping. Like, someone like, say, in China might have issues with, paying like for something extravagant. So you gotta be very cognizant of like what you can offer that's reasonable. And that takes some research.
Just a thought. Perhaps a free reward for a writer would be that, if they contribute to your Kickstarter program, you have a one-to-one Skype.
Yeah, that does happen. That is a tier. Sometimes, depending on how well known you are, that can be $100, $200 tier. That's usually where that actually hits the range of. I would advise as a writer, limit that to like 5 at the most. Especially the more well known you are, the more demand for that there will be. So the good news is you can probably charge a premium for that if you are well known enough. The bad news is you will always be in demand no matter what the charge is. So limit yourself. Like, there are also limit something of 5, limit something of 10, limit something like. Yeah. There are reasons for that, right? So, anything else?
Yeah, I think I literally fell asleep for 20 years, and you're basically talking in Klingon. Can you point me to somewhere to research this?
Okay, so you can start at Kickstarter itself.
Yeah.
Actually, and I wish the first
thing. There's facts and stuff on there.
Oh, there's facts on it, but also the big thing too is you can look at successful campaigns, right? And you can look at failures. Like, look at all different campaigns. Look at why you think they worked and why you think they didn't. It's a good that would be the good basic start line. At that point, the next thing I'd look at is, okay, what are my goals? Like, who am I targeting? What am I hitting? And then research your budget, like whatever that budget would be, right? At that point, and then lastly, look at the percentages Kickstarter takes. I don't know. I think Kickstarter tells you about that, but they might not do that up front. So look up what they're actually taking from you. Factor that in. And you never stop learning. Just the way it is. So, is there anything else?
Maybe just recap the sites that
you. All right. Real quick. So, beginning, if you guys want to try crowdfunding, if you're doing it just for a general project, like just a one-off project, Kickstarter is a good way to do it. It would be the best way to do it. It's got the most reach, the most range. There are a couple other ones like Indiegogo. I didn't get into this time. They do have their limitations in terms of range. Kickstarter is generally considered the best one. GoFundMe, if you're doing a charitable cause, if you're doing like what I did with my teeth, GoFundMe is great for that. And that is where I would recommend if you wanted to do something like that. If you want to try to do something a little bit more intensive, Patreon it can be very lucrative in the long haul. But like I said at the very beginning, who's your audience? How big is your audience? And that I think more than anything else, also realize that when you start Patreon, you're almost starting at zero, unless your audience is a substantial size. So it is a lot more work. It can be very rewarding. Like I said, there are successful people in that as well, but like there are pros and cons to each of them. All right. Hey, thank you.
Josh.